Let's talk about the Ole Miss-Tennessee game. Ole Miss 31, Tennessee 26. Who in the world thought 31 was going to be enough? I would have made a significant side wager that someone was going to have 31 before halftime. I would have lost, but I would have made that bet. A lot of things are getting overshadowed today. So I want to very responsibly break this down. Lane Kiffin, first and foremost, let me hit the game. Lane Kiffin last night sort of embodied everything that you would expect to have seen in a bygone era on Monday Night Raw, let's say. You've got full heel persona. You've got all the bells and whistles of a character. Not just a person, but a character that was created in one of Vince McMahon's laboratories up there in Stamford, Connecticut, as a matter of fact. And boy, he played it. And boy, he loves it. He doesn't shy away from it. Lane Kiffin leans in to the heel persona. And so I'm standing there last night, and I'm watching Matt Corral, and you're watching him right now if you're watching on YouTube, have the game of his life. And this was overshadowed. No one's talking about this today. This is one thing that's been overshadowed. Matt Corral goes for 231 through the air, 195 on the ground. I can't even begin to count how many third downs he bailed them out on with his legs. A couple of them with his arm, but with his legs. Ole Miss ended up running 101 offensive plays. Side note, Tennessee doesn't have a bye coming up this week. Tennessee's defense on the field 101 plays. They got to go to Alabama this week. They still got to play Georgia too. So it's sledgehammer to the kneecap, sledgehammer to the shin, sledgehammer to the throat. That's life in the SEC. 101 to 79 total plays there. Yet Tennessee had a shot, several of them actually, in the second half, because Tennessee's defense did a very good job. I think much better than people, to be honest with you, I thought both sides defensively performed a little bit higher level than really most people expected them to. Tennessee had several shots. There were multiple times, one possession game, Tennessee's got the ball. Tennessee has a chance to take the game. Since we were talking about pro wrestling, it's like the ladder match. And you're on the highest rung, and you're reaching for the belt, but maybe it's swinging from the rafters, or maybe someone's grabbing your ankle, but you keep reaching, and you can't grab the belt. You can't grab the belt. Tennessee could not grab the belt last night. No matter how many times they lunged for it, they couldn't grab the belt. Then the fourth quarter comes around. And the fourth quarter was one of the longest 2 months of my life last night. Let me take you through my train of thought, because everyone who watched this game remembers it in your own unique way. So there was I think we can all agree, a very suspect, a very sketch fourth down spotting of a ball. Wasn't even close to the first poor spot of the night, but it was a very bad spot. I thought it at the time. It was validated on replay. But it doesn't get overturned. And so Tennessee loses possession of the ball, and it looked like, for all the world, that meant they had lost the game. Now, it turns out about an hour later, we found out they still had a chance to win the game. But what followed was a really ugly scene. I'm not going to shy away from that. It was a very ugly scene. I'm going to talk about it. I was standing right down there in that end zone, so I was under fire just as much as anyone else was. But what I want to emphasize before we take a look at some of the B-roll I shot last night, yes, I had the iJosh with me, is it was not a spontaneous reaction. And I can tell you it's not. And I can tell you it wasn't because I felt it building all night. Now, here's what I'm about to do. I'm going to probably caveat this 2 or 3 times over the next few minutes. Nothing I'm about to say is meant in any way whatsoever to excuse any of the horrific behavior from some, not all, not even most, but some last night. I think I've been clear enough. Not Portuguese. We're speaking pure English to you, not excusing any of it. But what I am telling you is it was not spontaneous. You could feel it building. And when they were in the middle of that replay last night, I'm talking to a couple of guys next to me. I've been in these positions enough to feel a crowd. You know, A, you know when they're going to rush the field. B, you know when you're about to have to turn around or else get pelted with debris. And I knew they were about to throw stuff. And I told someone, 2 guys next to me, watch what happens. You better turn around. I was telling them what protocol is. Turn your face to the crowd instead of what you think you should do if this call does not go Tennessee's way. It was a horrifically officiated game last night. You couldn't change anything at that point. But the culmination was when that call doesn't get overturned, here we go. Now, if you've never been in this situation, let me tell you what you don't do. What you don't do is turn your back and face the field and then just let your entire head be exposed. What you have to do, which I learned the hard way a couple of years ago, I'm I'm not going to mention which venue, you've got to turn your body to the field, and you got to turn your face to the crowd. You got to open your eyes really wide, and you got to look up. And you have to be like an entire little radar screen there. You got to go left, right, left, right. That saved me. I counted 3 different times, maybe 4, but at least 3 different times over the next several minutes as debris just rained down on the field from getting nailed. Having said that, knowing me like you do, you know I didn't leave the end zone. Instead, I pulled the eye josh out. Now, I couldn't get great footage while it was happening because I didn't want to bust the lens. But after the initial couple of showers of debris had happened, I did pull out the eye josh. I think we have some of the footage, actually. I did pull out the eye josh, and I just kind of scanned the floor, and yeah, it was a bad scene, and yeah, they had stopped play, and I think I ended up on the 50-yard line, by the way. Here's how crazy this was last night. This is during stoppage of play if you're watching on YouTube. I, with over a minute to go in the game, spent about 10 minutes on the midfield logo talking to players as the game still is going on. In no world is that supposed to happen, but yet you had to clear the sideline because the cops came in. And when I say cops, I mean the entirety of every police force in the state of Tennessee comes in. So yeah, that was the scene. Okay, obviously there's no excusing this. This is very, very poor decision making. But the key, folks, is to always turn your face right towards where the action's coming from. Don't turn your back to it, kids. Do not turn your back to it. Now, before I talk about what the impetus was, aside from poor decision making for that, I want to show you the video I shot of Lane Kiffin exiting the field last night. When I tell you Lane Kiffin leans into the heel persona, what I mean is he leans into the heel persona. If they're going to hate you, you can't change their mind. So Lane Kiffin's walking off the field, and they have not flushed the student section. First way that I knew something was about to go wrong. So Lane Kiffin is pointing to his heart, then pointing to the student section. Number 1, they're giving him one-finger salutes too. And here it comes, bottle, boom, Lane Kiffin, Odell Beckham, one-handed catch, and then for good measure, heads down the tunnel, and what does he do with the visor? He tosses it into the crowd, and a couple of Tennessee fans fought over it. That's what kind of night it was. So one part, that's a little embarrassing. Another part, if you're just watching and judging it for what it is on the surface, it's kind of entertaining. But by and large, it was a bad night for the conference. But not just a bad night for the University of Tennessee. I want to stress, it was a bad night for the conference. So remember what I just said a second ago, because I need to reiterate it again now. Nothing I'm about to say, talking slow enough? Yes. Nothing I'm about to say is meant to excuse any of that. But we need to talk about something that I really haven't spent a lot of time talking about on this show. The SEC has a major officiating problem. And here's the problem. It's not good enough. You have got a billion-dollar operation going on. You've got the premier product in the sport, and you've got a nickel and dime officiating kind of facet to it, a tentacle to it, that's inexcusable. And it's been this way for a while. Let me tell you why this didn't just crop up. Last night, I'm sitting in the press box 5 hours before kickoff, and they're handing out the game cards, and you have the officiating crews always listed on the game cards. There were people who already were foretelling that evening's events when they saw the officiating crew that was assigned to the game. That's the same crew that horribly botched Memphis and Mississippi State a few weeks ago. And they put them on a powder keg of an environment, knowing full well what could happen. And then also you have shoddy products already from that group, and there they are. There they are. What price do you pay? You suck at work, you get fired. They haven't paid a price. And if the price is behind the scenes, slap on the wrist, $20 fine, that's not a price. So there they are last night. And then you have questionable call after questionable call after questionable call. And what I'm saying is a bunch of Tennessee fans did something stupid last night. We can acknowledge that, but I also don't think it's excusing the behavior to acknowledge that without piss poor officiating, you never would have gotten to that point. And it's not the first time it's happened, and it will not be the last time it happens in the SEC. They got a big-time officiating problem down here. It's happening every single week. It's not just an SEC problem, but this is a conference that claims it wants to lead by action. It wants to lead the pack. So before anyone else does anything, how about the SEC take the lead and again acknowledge this is a billion-dollar brand. We should not have a nickel and dime officiating branch on an otherwise billion-dollar tree. There's no reason for it. I've asked around to people in positions of authority right up to Greg Sankey, who will not give you an answer. But aside from Greg Sankey, I've asked people, no one ever gives you a good answer. They will always beat around the bush. It's like they fumble around in their pocket for an official league statement on it. It's not good enough. No one down here thinks it's good enough. No one's happy with it. No coaching staff's happy with it. No fan base is happy with it. None of them. This goes infinitely beyond the old, well, they remember the bad calls but don't remember the good calls. It's not that. Like, there's common sense here. It's not that. It goes 10 miles beyond that. But what the shame of it all is how much got overshadowed last night. Matt Corral's night, Lane Kiffin's night for that matter. It gets overshadowed. A great game got overshadowed. But there's one more thing that got overshadowed, and that is the crippling amounts of fake injuries in that game last night that stretched it 4.5 hours. If this would have been a noon game, do you realize it would have gone into the second quarter of the 3:30 kickoffs? Second quarter. They don't put up with that on Sundays. That's one of the facets the NFL gets right. They don't put up with those long games if overtime's not involved. What has happened here is a result of tempo-based offenses. That's obvious. And we used to sparingly see it. You know, you want to slow down the offense, you fake the injury. Well, nothing got done about it. Nothing. Because you looked around and you said, oh, it just happens here and there. Well, last night there were over a dozen of them. And it wasn't shrouded in mystery. It was blatantly obvious. There were guys looking to the sideline. They get the cue. They fall down like they got sniped in the ankle. No one's even trying to hide it. No one's under the guise that anything else is going on other than injuries being faked. So what are we going to do about it? Because I think before the ending of that game, Ole Miss's win was going to be talked about, and this was going to be the next biggest talking point. Well, I'm not letting it go because it's a mockery of the game. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to watch that be passed off as a legitimate product. That's not legitimate. If I were to have never been a fan of football, you know, like, let me put it to you like this. I don't like soccer. I don't really care about soccer. I'm not going to say I don't like it. I don't really care about soccer. But when I watch it occasionally, I have questions about things. There are some rules I have questions about that don't make sense to me, but I don't ask them to change their game. They'll be fine without me. But imagine a soccer fan whose game that you don't think makes a whole lot of sense coming to your house last night, and they're watching Ole Miss Tennessee. And imagine after you've made fun of soccer for flopping all these years, imagine they watch Ole Miss Tennessee last night, and that's American college football. Like, I've listened to you hate on my game, I've listened to you hate on football, and this is football? This is what you're... That's not anything. This guy doesn't even have a swollen ankle. This guy doesn't even have a cut on his wrist. He's laying down on the ground like he just... well, I'm not going to say it because of recent events, but you know what he's trying to pass off. Anyway, there has to be actual deterrent for this. You can't just tell coaches not to do it. I'm not even mad at Ole Miss or Tennessee. They're just doing what they know they can get away with. I'm not even hating on either program. I'm telling you that we've got such a backwards officiating apparatus in this sport right now to where I can do everything my coach tells me to do, and because someone else holding a football lowers his body and I hit him in the helmet, I'm ejected for a half of a game or the rest of a game. And yet I can fall down and blatantly fake injury and I get everything I want. There is no risk to do it. I just fall down. And in fact, some guys did it last night in almost a mocking fashion. Just fall down, lifeless, just fall down. So what are you going to do about it? It's not up to me. It's up to you. Like, you run the league. It's up to you. What are you going to do about it? Because if there's nothing punitive, if there's no deterrent, it's going to keep happening. What I would suggest is that if you're injured, if you're on the ground, you got to miss at least a quarter of football, the equivalent to a quarter of football, not just the series. You need to have to miss a quarter of football. If you can't come back in, then you can't come back in. So make them sit out a minimum of 15 minutes. And at that point still, if a coaching staff views the risk reward as making sense, if they want to sacrifice a guy a full 15 minutes, by all means, stop play. Go for it. A lot got overshadowed last night. It was a fun trip too. Love Tennessee. Got treated great there. Love Tennessee. Love the folks there. Black eye caused by some. I'm not going to do what a lot of our brethren did in the national college football media last night and banish the entirety of the Tennessee fan base to Guantanamo detention while we await sentencing for them. Really don't think it was that big a deal. Comparatively speaking, there are bigger issues in the world. But yeah, it was a bad look for some. But I can tell you I had a different vantage point than pretty much everyone else. I was telling Director Colin, I'm on the field. I'm looking up. I can tell you what 9/10 of those fans were doing. They were looking around trying to find out who was throwing stuff. That's what the rest of them were doing. So don't let the few Allow you to cast aspersions on the many. That's all I'm asking.